as you inhale, carry the breath upwards. So carry the breath from that place below the navel. Carry it up through the body, all the way up to your third eye center, that place just between the eyebrows. And then let it drop back down. See whether on one gentle, slow, smooth inhalation, you can carry the breath up to that third eye center. If not, don't worry. Just carry it as high as you comfortably can, without straining, without holding your breath. As high as you can comfortably. And then let it go. And with each inhalation, try to carry that breath higher and higher, closer to the third eye, that Agya chakra. The Agya chakra is the center, the power of discrimination that enables us to see the truth through the falsehood. So we focus on the third eye and open it, so that in our lives we can see truth, see divinity. And on each exhalation, as you breathe out, allow yourself to drop back down to that place below the navel. So we're taking the inhalations from there and dropping back down there on the exhalations. You can add a gentle mantra with it if you'd like. If you find that the mind wanders, you can chant so on the inhalation and hum on the exhalation silently to yourself. So hum. It means I am that. I am the universe. I am the divine. There is no separation. I am that. Gently bring the palms together at chest level in Namaste. And rub the palms of the hands gently against each other. Place the palms over your closed eyes. And open your eyes into the palms of your hands. Gently, whenever you're ready, lower your hands. Welcome to Satsang again. I'll begin with a question or two that have come in advance and then open it up to any questions that anyone has. How do I drop off all stories, phobias, fears, past memories, and surrender to the unknowing? I want to move on, but I'm not sure if I have to go to the root of the cause of the problems, or do I just practice I am not that? So, good question. It's a question really of this intersection in many ways of psychology and spirituality. So, do I need to know what I'm not before I realize I'm not it? I've got stories, I've got fears, I've got dramas, I've got a history, I've got issues, complexes, all sorts of things. Illusions, desires, ego, indoctrination. I mean, we could go on all night. So I've got all of this, but I know I'm not it. To what extent do I need to look at it? Or can I simply know I'm not it? It's actually a question that varies from person to person. There's not one right answer. But I can give a few rules of thumb to know. For the vast, overwhelming majority of us, we have to look at our stuff. And the reason is that our unconscious, our subconscious are programmed by that. And when we have deep spiritual experiences, when I know I'm not that, that's not always enough to undo fully unconscious and subconscious programming. And this is where you get a lot of times what's spoken about as a spiritual bypass. And a spiritual bypass is something that's more tragically common than it should be, but it happens a lot, where you have a very deep spiritual experience, a very real spiritual experience. And then you decide, I'm done. I'm there. But the awareness is not full and complete. There's still ignorance. There's still ego. There's still all sorts of unconscious and subconscious patterns in the mind. And we end up then acting in ways that are not spiritual at all. whether in our relationships, whether in our work. And it becomes very difficult for people around you to reconcile this. Well, how is this person, someone who theoretically is so deeply spiritual, has had these spiritual experiences, and yet is so difficult to get along with, and yet is like this or like that? And what this is a really typical spiritual bypass. Having a deep spiritual experience is not, sadly, an inoculation or a cure either way. So it doesn't work either preventatively or retrospectively for everything else that has ever happened to us in our life. It would be really nice if it were. It would be really nice if a good meditation, a deep experience of God, were just enough to wipe out everything. Unfortunately, it's not. And what it is enough to do, though, is enough to show us the truth. So we know where we need to go. We know what we're going toward. So that at least when the rest of the stuff comes up in us, we're able to know I'm not that. So I don't get stuck in it. But we still need to work with it. Because ultimately the goal is not just to intellectually know I'm not that, but actually to be free of it. That's the point of a spiritual practice, freedom. Not just, I know intellectually I'm not this identity, I'm not this history, I'm not this complex, I'm not this fear. And in most cases, and we'll come back, as I said, there's some other cases, but in most cases, in order to have a really deeply full and therefore more permanent, more available in more circumstances, spiritual experience, I need to look at some of that stuff. Otherwise, I can't remember if it's Ram Dass or Jack Kornfield, both of whom are beautiful, beautiful spiritual teachers from America, but one of them says, when you think you're enlightened, go and spend 2 weeks with your parents. Because there's nothing like undoing a premature decision that I'm enlightened, like spending 2 weeks with your parents. And this is why we have to look at stuff. Because ultimately the goal is my enlightenment should be able to last even if I have to spend 2 weeks with my parents. I mean, it shouldn't be parents or enlightenment. But when it's in the very beginning, when it's that divine spiritual experience, but that doesn't include looking at things in my life, looking at the fears, looking at the complexes, looking at the patterns, then I find myself saying things like, oh, I can't be with that person because he or she destroys my peace. Or don't come too close because I've had a really good meditation and I'm really peaceful and I don't want to talk to you. Don't disturb my peace. Don't open your mouth. I don't want to hear that. And our life becomes very limited because there become a very limited number of people, places, situations that we can be in and still experience peace. And so this is where that psychological element comes in. Do I have to look at every single fear? Every single aspect of my drama? No. Most of them tend to be just different examples of the same thing. Most of us tend to have a small handful of our issues. We all have some mix of ego and anger and attachment and expectation and jealousy and self-worth issues and all of that. But most of us we have a different mix of them. Different ones that are much deeper to us. And most of that comes from our families of origin. Most of that stuff comes from childhood. What did we experience? In what way were our parents not 100% perfect? Having tried the very best that they could, doing the best that they could with the tools that they had. But they were each imperfect in a unique way, which means that they gave us sort of a unique blend of stuff. And if we don't know what our stuff is, despite a beautiful spiritual experience or the spiritual awareness that I am not that, that only works as long as I'm in my conscious mind. If I'm sitting in meditation, I'm not the body, I'm not the emotions, I'm not my history, I'm fine. But put me in the world, put me face to face with my issues. Well, what ends up happening is that subconscious and unconscious programming starts running the show. And this especially happens when our conscious mind is elsewhere. So if I'm stressed, if I'm too much in the future, too much in the past, well, I'm not in the present. And when I'm not in the present to run my show consciously, then my subconscious and my unconscious kick in and come in. And when they kick in, then I've got all of those patterns. So that's why it's important to look at the stuff that I know I'm not. Now, this is where, though, it becomes delicate, because the world of psychology, in many cases, is sort of a never-ending experience. I mean, people are in therapy forever, and nothing inherently wrong with that. It's certainly nice to have somebody to talk to who's quiet and wise, and but ultimately the goal is we should come out back toward the light. And what the looking at my stuff that I know I'm not does is it shows me who I am on that lowercase s self level, so that I know what do I need to work through. And so whether it's issues of jealousy, whether it's issues of competition, whether it's issues of not enoughness, whether it's issues of authority, whatever my thing may be or my things may be, if I don't look at them, when I'm in my subconscious, unconscious mind, because my conscious mind is elsewhere, and even sometimes when I'm conscious, but I'm not sitting with my eyes closed meditating, I act those out. And we don't want to be acting out of that. If I know I'm not the story of my childhood, if I know I'm not the imperfection but divinity of my parents, if I know I'm not that, then why am I acting like it? Why am I causing myself and people around me to suffer? And so this is where looking at it is really important. We look at it and we work with it. So it's one thing to know, okay, these are my fears, these are my stories, these are my issues. But we also, in some cases, need to work with them. And so, yes, knowing I'm not that is really important. But in many cases, knowing what you're not is equally important. And the only exception to this, as I began with saying there's not 100% always right answer, is if you happened to be born into a family, into a situation where, due to God's grace, due to whatever circumstances, they really did not program you with any issues. For me, the only person I know is Pujya Swamiji's parents. I mean, just the environment he was born into was an environment of such divinity and such grace. And he left the home at 8. So even if we are not necessarily his disciples, or even if we're not necessarily people who say, well, okay, so he's an avatar, he's come down enlightened, even if you're not in that school, what we know is he didn't have issues to work with. He was able at 8 to go off with his guru and meditate in the jungles and not ever have issues come up from his unconscious or subconscious programming. He just doesn't have any of that. He is the only one I know. And I, of course, do believe that he came into this body enlightened, but that's a side point. He came into this world to parents who were enlightened. Aside from that situation, most of us weren't raised like that. We weren't parented like that. We didn't go off with our guru at 8. We had home environments that have imprinted upon us in different ways. And part of knowing I'm not that is actually being able to be free of that so that I don't wreak havoc on myself and on others. And I can't do that work if I don't know what it is. And so this is really where the spirituality and the psychology go hand in hand. But the psychology just takes us into it. And the spirituality is really what helps us be free of it. And so I tend to think of it as psychology taking us into our darkness so that we're able to see our darkness. What is it in me that, not that is dark, but that feels dark in me? What is it in me that when I close my eyes and sit alone feels dark? Or that as I move through my world feels not enough, feels ashamed, has all of those feelings of darkness. Psychology takes us into those, and those that then cause me to react out in the world, out of anger, out of greed, out of lust, out of whatever it may be. But spirituality is what helps us turn back toward the light and find our way back into the light. And so in almost every case, they both are needed. I'm happy, before taking any of the others that came in advance, I'm happy to take any questions that anyone here may have. Yes? Good. Okay, so what's the role of seva or karma yoga, even if we're not actually living in an ashram? If we are living somewhere else, we've got a 9-to-5 job, we're in the world, what's the role? What I do in the world is what I do for me, usually, or for my family, but sort of a small family. And so even if it's an Indian extended family, it's still small when you compare it to the world. So whether it's a spouse or a spouse and a few children, or a spouse and some children and some in-laws, however big your family may be. What I'm doing either for me or for me and them. And most of it is about a material existence. So I'm earning money so that we can pay the mortgage on the house, so that we can have food on the table, so that my kids can go to a good university. I mean, stop most people on their way to work and say, hey, why are you going where they're going? Very few, if any of them, are going to say, oh, for spiritual awakening. They're going to say, I'm going because got to pay the bills. I'm going because got to pay off the mortgage. I'm going because whatever it may be. Or because I have a goal, a vision of climbing a career ladder, of achieving something. And by the way, it's important to just stop for a moment and say there's nothing bad or wrong here. Working to pay your bills, working for the family, working for a goal, there's nothing wrong with any of that. It's just important to look at what we're working for so that we can compare it with save or karma yoga. So maybe I'm working because I have a vision, a goal of climbing the career ladder, and so I'm doing this job today because this is what's going to get me to where I want to go. But again, why do I want to get where I want to go? Well, it has to do with my goal or my vision or my dream, what I want. So that's why most of us do that. You can take it a step deeper. In the families, a lot of what we do is for the relationship. And so we serve each other out of love, out of duty in the relationship. But that still is keeping us on really a very surface level of the fullness of life. What seva is, or karma yoga literally means union through action. Yoga is union, karma means action. Karma yoga literally means union through action. The yoga of action. Now, ultimately, every single thing I do is karma yoga. So ultimately, regardless of whether I'm pumping gas, serving coffee in a restaurant, or running an NGO, or anything in between, ideally, every single thing I do is done in service of union. But that's something very, very rare and challenging in that world. And so we come to seva, which, whether it's something that you do 7 days a week, 365 days a year living in an ashram, or whether it's something that you do Tuesday evenings and Saturday mornings, or whatever it may be, a few weeks a year, a few months a year, it's that which actually, it's that action which brings us into the experience of the truth of who we are. That's why we do it. And it's interesting because the service very frequently is service of an organization, and the organization runs projects and programs, and so maybe you're directly serving the projects and programs, maybe you're fundraising for the organization or stuffing envelopes for the organization, or maybe you're cleaning the toilets of the organization, whatever it may be. But you're doing something that seems to be serving others. But ultimately, seva is actually a spiritual practice. It's not about me serving you. It's not about me as the humanitarian karma yogi and you as the receiver. Ultimately, we do seva because through serving others, through serving selflessly, through serving what is needed rather than what I would like to do, we get out of that ego in our minds of who we think we are and our roles and our titles and our this and that. And we are serving creation. We're serving existence. And so whether it's cleaning toilets or fundraising or stuffing envelopes or designing websites or teaching in schools or building schools brick by brick or whatever it may be. Yeah, we're serving others, our global family that it's connecting us to. But from my spiritual perspective, ultimately the goal is not about how much I can serve you. It's about how can I, in the service of you, experience myself in you. How can I actually experience the expansion of myself through service? And that's why we do seva. And so seva is not so much about what or how much, but about how and about who. Who am I who is serving? Because of course, as in anything spiritual, ego can come in as well. All of that can come in as well. And so you get the, I am the most humble. You guys really should, practice and learn to become as humble as I am. I am the best sevak. See how humbly and selflessly I serve. So we've lost it when that happens. Because I may stuff more envelopes than you've stuffed, but I've missed the point of seva. I have not experienced myself in you. If I'm telling you, you should really aim to be as humble as I am. I'm humbler than you. So seva is our way to connect with the fullness of ourself through serving our global family. And the beautiful thing in seva is there's nothing small and there's nothing big. Because in our global family, in creation, God doesn't love the rose more than he loves the jasmine. And so whether I happen to be the gardener watering the rose or I happen to be the gardener watering the jasmine, depending on which seva I've been given, they're both serving creation. And so whether I'm the toilet cleaner or I'm the chopper of vegetables or I'm the stuffer of envelopes or I'm the bricklayer or I'm the website designer or I'm the fundraiser or I'm whatever it may be, we're serving a different aspect of creation. And so the beautiful aspect of seva is there's no ladder to climb. It's not about going somewhere. It's about going in through the action. Karma yoga. Union through action. And so however much of it you can do. If you've got a 9 to 5 and you're in the world and feeding a family, okay, so the hours may be few, but it's crucial for everyone to do regardless of how much time you have. Because it gets you back into connection with what you're working for and who you are as a worker. See, when you get up every day and you go to the job, the 9 to 5, you've got a title, you've got a career, you've got people who are above you, people who are below you, you've got a promotion you're yearning to get, you've got a ladder you're climbing. You've got people you boss around, you've got people who boss you around. But in Seva, all of that disappears. And it doesn't mean that there aren't systems. Of course there are systems. And of course there's different people doing different things according to their skill, their ability, their interest. But the goal of it all is union. Am I, through my seva, connecting? And if not, then it's not that there's a problem with my seva, it's that there's a problem with my meditation. Frequently we'll think, oh, I'm not connecting with myself or with God through my seva, I need to change my seva. It's not the problem in the seva, it's the problem in the meditation. Because it means that in my meditation, I'm not having an experience of an expansion of the self from which I emerge able to serve that expansion of myself. And so the two really go hand in hand. The seated, eyes closed meditation and the standing or sitting but eyes open, hands working. Yoga, service, they go together. So whether it's what you do all day, every day, or whether it's what you do a few days a week or a month, either way, make sure you're doing it and make sure you're doing as much of it as you can. And ultimately, even try to make your 9 to 5 karma yoga. Just because you get paid to do something doesn't mean it can't be karma yoga. Just because there's a nameplate on your door and an official title doesn't mean it can't be karma yoga. If you can use it as a way to connect with yourself, capital S self, then it's karma yoga. Wherever it is and whatever it is. Yes. Last question. Great. So it's a beautiful topic of destiny. Because of course the teaching is whatever is destined to happen will happen. Whatever is not destined to happen won't happen. The question, though, becomes, and in the answering to this question, we find a bridge between the answer that I had given the other night when we were talking about service and working and engaged activism and spiritual activism and doing whatever we can to heal that in the world which is ailing, whether it's hunger, whether it's thirst, whether it's women dying in childbirth, or whether it's the ex-husbands of friends of ours who are turning their children against them, and everything in between. That our highest goal is not just how can I sit this one out, but rather how can I act, but act from a place of peace and acceptance and connection. So how do we bridge those? Well, for me, it has to do with where the in predestined, what it refers to. And so yes, everything is predestined, but pre simply means prior to this present moment. It doesn't necessarily mean 10,000 years ago. And as far as I understand, the spiritual science of karma and destiny, our destiny is made up of a lot of things. Everything ranging from planetary alignment and the magnetic pull between them and the earth and our bodies, to all of the actions we have done over the course of not only this life but past lives, to all of those beings with whom our karmic thread is interlinked and interwoven, that our destiny is written based on a combination of all of those things. Well, some of them were written a long time ago. Things I did in past lives, depending on how far you go back, took place a lot longer ago than that which I did last week. Where the planets were aligned when I was born and the magnetic pull between them took place exactly as many years ago as when I was born. The destiny, the predestiny, is built up of all of that which is pre this moment. The misunderstanding comes when we think that pre means that at some point, tens of thousands of years ago, every single thing that ever will happen to anyone without any free will is already written. And if that were the case, then of course the question is written by whom? The only answer to that is written by God, because if it was written before I ever did anything in a past life, before any of us ever existed, then who wrote it? Well, certainly not the amoebas or the bacteria, right? I mean, if you just think logically, if we assume it was all written at that point, well, then who wrote it? Only God. Well, that same God is the one who gave us free will. That wouldn't make any sense. If I knew where you were going, I mean, if I'm in the driver's seat of the car and I know where we're going, I'm not going to give you a guidebook and say, let me know wherever you want to stop. if I've decided where we're going and there is going to be no stopping and no change and no different turn, unless I'm cruel or malicious or wanting to just play with you, why would I hand you a guidebook and say, let me know if you want some ice cream along the way, or let me know when you need to pee, or tell me when you want to turn? If I already know I'm not stopping or turning because I know exactly where this car is going. So to me, that doesn't make any sense. If God is the one who wrote it, and God is the one who gave us free will, and God is the one who's given us scriptures that say, meditate, go within, know who you are so you know what to do. And God is the one who has given us Buddha and Krishna and Jesus Christ and all of our divine leaders who have given us very clear instructions on how to act, how to live, how to be. Well, if there was no point, and the whole thing was just an absolute exercise in futility, what it means is that we have to assume that not only God, but all of those enlightened beings were just playing games with us. We're just being cruel. And that's not my felt sense experience of the divine. And so therefore, just moving this through logically, therefore, if we've been given free will, and we've been given divine enlightened beings and scriptures that say, meditate, go within, find the way, what that means is that free will, that sadhana, that Jnana yoga, bhakti yoga, karma yoga. I mean, really, Krishna's going to say, do these things, but it doesn't matter anyway? That doesn't matter anyway is to the soul. Soul was never born. Soul never dies. Soul cannot be burned, cannot be cut, cannot be dried. I mean, all of these teachings of the Gita. But our experience of the soul, our mind, our karma, we're writing that as we go along. This is why when Krishna says in the Gita, it is better to die, when Arjuna says, I'm going to die, and Lord Krishna says, well, maybe. You may. He doesn't say to him, fight this battle, don't worry, I promise nothing's going to happen to you. He says, fight this battle because it is better to die engaged in fulfilling your dharma than it is to live safely but not fulfill your dharma. Now, Krishna's the divine. Is he just saying that to play with us? Because, well, anyway, doesn't matter anyway. Your enlightenment, your non-enlightenment, your karma, it's all pre-written. It doesn't make sense to me logically. And so, from what I've learned, from what I've understood in my scientific, logical processing of pieces that I get, here's how I understand it. And the only way that for me makes sense. Where we are up to this moment is predestined. We cannot change it. You cannot rewrite history. You cannot rewind the last few hours or weeks or months or years. But where you're going to be tomorrow is a product not only of that which you came into this moment with. Yes, some of that is there. Your actions of past lives are there. Your actions of earlier in this life are there. Your planetary alignment is there. But it is added to, impacted by, and even potentially dramatically changed by what you do in this moment. And so this moment is the predestined, predetermined of where I'm going to be in my next moment. So yes, it was determined prior to this moment. But in some cases, some parts of it were determined 5 minutes ago. Other pieces have been carried in. Because there's no enlightened being, and this for me is really my way of knowing. There's only 2 ways I can know anything. Either I've experienced it personally, or it has been told to me by people in whom I have, due to my personal experience with them, complete faith. Or beings whom perhaps I haven't met, masters of the past, but beings, due to everything I know about them, are beings worthy of trust and respect. And there is no being of that category whom I've ever met or heard or read of who says, don't worry about what you do. Don't worry if you meditate or don't meditate. Don't worry if you're enlightened or not enlightened. Don't worry whether you overcome your desires and your egos and your identities or not. Just sit here and wait it out. You're sitting on a conveyor belt, basically. It's going where it's going to go. You might as well eat the ice cream. It was predestined anyway. I've never heard that. The silence to which he refers is the silence of meditation. You don't just become silent because you snap your fingers and suddenly you're silent. You're silent because you meditate. And when you meditate, how you act changes. There is a silence in your way of being, even when you're speaking. You know, we speak a lot about silence being full. Puja Swamiji practices many, many, many hours of silence every day and has spent many, many, many months and years of his life in complete silence. But he emphasizes it's not a silence that's just an absence of words or sound. It's a silence that's full. It's a silence in the presence of which the real sound comes in. The real truth comes in. And in that, you see and experience and hear and know the truth, out of which you then act. And so while your silence becomes full, your life and your actions become silent. There isn't that craziness of the mind. There isn't that insecurity of the mind. Brings us back to the first question a bit. We know I am not that because in my silence I have experienced that. But I still act. Again, in the Gita, Lord Krishna made it perfectly clear that you can't not act anyway. Not fulfilling your duty is an action. It's an action of omission rather than an action of commission, but that's still an action. To not bend down and pick someone up who has fallen on the ground in front of you is an action. Again, it's an action of omission instead of an action of commission, but it's very much an action. And so that which is destined is where you are right now. So we don't worry about the past. We don't worry, again, going back to the first question, we don't worry about what it is that's happened to us, where we're from, the drama of our lives. We don't live our life today based on that drama, whether it's the drama of our childhood, whether it's the drama of our relationships today. We move from them. When we talk about, vairagya, that detachment, well, this happens naturally. As I know who I am. But I still act in the world. I just act from a place of silence, from a place of stillness, from a place of knowing the truth of who I am, rather than from that frenetic energy of, oh, got to take care of this, got to do this. If this doesn't happen, then this is going to happen. And oh my God, and my kids this, and my husband that, or my parents that, or my employees that, or my employer that. We don't act from that frenetic energy. We act from a place of silence. So where we are right now is destined. But what we do in this moment has the power to deeply impact where we will be in our next moment. And again, of course, a lot of it's impacted from all of those other things as well. But what we do in this moment, our free will and how we use it in this moment. Puja Swamiji always says, whenever you wake up, it's morning. So when I wake up, I can see. And when I can see, I live differently. So we write that destiny as we go. Yeah.